Night fell over the narrow, silent street, the only light coming from the yellow glow of ancient streetlights, casting long, distorted shadows across the wet asphalt. I stood there leaning against my car, feeling the chill that seemed to penetrate not just my jacket, but my very soul. Remembering the chilly early mornings patrolling enemy territory in the trenches, the smell of gunpowder mingling with fear clinging to my skin. A police car appeared, blue lights reflecting off the fogged glass. And before I could comprehend, the officer got out, his expression rigid, almost as if he took pleasure in wielding power he didn't deserve. "Do you know why I'm here?" His voice carried authority, but it was cold, almost mechanical. My heart beat faster, not out of fear of the officer himself, but the specter of what it meant to be wronged. I tried to remain calm, every muscle tense, remembering the lessons the war had ingrained in me. Breath control, observation, patience. As he scribbled on the ticket pad, I noticed the curious glances of passers-by on the wet sidewalk. The feeling was strange, as if injustice became heavier when witnessed. A young couple stopped, whispering to each other, clearly torn between ignoring and interfering. I felt the weight of the decades I carried on my body. Invisible scars, memories of lost friends, battles no one could fully comprehend. And yet, here I was, confronted by a man who likely had no idea what it meant to fight, survive, lose everything, and keep going. There was something symbolic about the scene. The veteran, scarred by war, confronted by an authority that represented rules, order, but not justice. Every movement of the officer seemed exaggerated, every scribble on the ticket pad a reminder that, at times, society prefers to punish without question. The wind blew hard between the old buildings, carrying with it the smell of rain and the memories of what I had left behind. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension rise. Every second felt like an echo of the sirens that once woke me in the middle of the night, calling for missions that determined who would survive. And in that instant, I realized this wasn't just a ticket. It was a symbolic battle. A battle that would require more than patience or physical strength. It would require moral courage, the courage that only those who have faced death can fully understand. The people around me continued to watch, some with curiosity, others with disdain. And I knew that any action I took could completely change their perception. Each look was a silent sentence, but also an opportunity, a chance to show that life experience and honor cannot be erased by a pen scribbling on paper. The officer looked at me, and in that silent exchange, I felt an almost palpable tension, as if the entire weight of my military life was compressed into that moment of decision. And then he raised the pad, ready to sign the injustice with his stamp of authority. My heart raced, my mind raced through strategies, but this time there were no enemies before me, only a choice: give in to the absurd, or let the world witness the truth about who I truly was. An instant stretched into eternity. The wind howled between the buildings, the rain began to form small puddles, reflecting the blue and red lights, almost like a memory of the nights of combat when the sky seemed to open in fire and blood. And in that exact moment, I realized that something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would change not only the perception of the police officer, but of everyone there. A simple gesture could transform a scene of injustice into a moment of revelation, and I was ready to act. But before that, the tension lingered, every detail recorded, every breath a silent countdown to the imminent outcome. My name is John, though many simply call me veteran, as if my entire identity could be summed up in that word. Before the war, my life was ordinary, but not simple. I grew up in a small town, surrounded by open fields and the constant smell of wet earth. My father was a firm man, of few words, but every lesson he taught me was a moral compass, shaping the man I would become. My mother, on the other hand, was the heart of the home, always tending to the wounds the world left in us, unaware that one day I would bear wounds that not even she could see. When I was drafted, everything changed. The first time I put on my uniform, I felt something inside me awaken. A mixture of responsibility, fear, and a strange sense of inevitability. The war took me to places most people could never imagine. Lands shrouded in smoke and darkness, deserted cities, muddy trenches, and streets where the silence was as heavy as fear itself. I saw friends die, some silently, others screaming for help that no one could offer. Death became a constant companion, and the memory of those lost haunts me to this day, like shadows that refuse to disappear even under the brightest sun. The battles I faced weren't just physical. The war demanded a mental resilience I never imagined I possessed. Every decision was a fine line between life and death, between saving and losing. I learned to read the smallest signs, a sudden movement, a distant sound, the smell of gunpowder in the air, and respond with precision. But I also learned that some wounds never heal. I carry with me memories that surface unexpectedly. A friend's laughter before falling, the sound of helicopters circling the field, and above all the weight of guilt that never fully dissolves. When I returned, I thought civilian life would bring peace. But the reality was different. The world seemed indifferent to what I had endured. I walked the streets, observing people occupied with trivial concerns, unaware of how lucky they were to have never known the horror of war. I tried to adapt, but the echo of sirens and the smell of gunpowder always followed me. Some call it post-traumatic stress disorder. For me, it's simply a part of who I am, a constant reminder of what was lost and what must be honored. And that's why I'm here, on that narrow, dimly lit street. The car in front of me, the police officer ready to act. Everything reminds me that even outside the battlefield, the fight continues. Injustice still manifests itself, not with bullets or explosions, but with judgmental looks, authorities who abuse their power, and a society that doesn't always recognize sacrifices. Every step I take is filled with memory, every gesture with experience. I'm aware of what's at stake, not just my pride, but the truth that insists on making itself heard. I carry with me not only medals and badges, but invisible scars and memories that have shaped my worldview. Life has taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act even when fear is present. And it is precisely this courage that I will need now, as I face something seemingly trivial, an unfair fine, but which symbolizes a greater battle. To be seen, to be respected, to be remembered as someone who gave everything without expecting recognition, and yet to be worthy of humanity in the face of injustice. As I lean lightly against the car, I feel the weight of years and experiences. Every muscle, every joint tells a story of survival. And as the police officer approaches, drafting his punishment, I realize that this moment is not just about me, but about all those veterans who, even off the battlefield, face small and large daily injustices. Every detail of the past blends into the present, and I know deep down that the real battle, that of honor, of dignity, is about to begin. The police officer raised the ticket booklet like a scepter of power, and for a moment, everything around me seemed to fall silent. The distant hum of traffic, the rustling of trees, and even the cold wind blowing through the streets all blended into an almost palpable sense of tension. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just a ticket about to be issued. It was the embodiment of arbitrary injustice, of what society often calls authority, but which in reality may be nothing more than an abuse disguised as duty. "You parked illegally," he said, pointing with a pen that seemed to glow under the streetlight. His voice was firm, implacable, and for a moment, I felt a memory that had nothing to do with parking, the blunt order of a superior on the battlefield, demanding immediate obedience with no room for explanation. But the difference was clear. There, on the battlefield, my decisions saved lives. Here, now, my experiences and my honor were being judged by an arbitrary rule that understood nothing about who I am. I tried to calmly explain my situation. "Sir, I believe there's been a mistake. I parked briefly just for a few minutes But he interrupted me with a brusque gesture. His eyes showed no doubt, only mechanical certainty. The emotional blockage was almost palpable, as if he were dealing not with a person, but with an object that needed to be classified and punished. Beside me, some passers-by began to observe the scene curiously. There was a mixture of contempt and compassion in their gazes, but nothing that could interfere in that moment of power imbalance. What hurt me wasn't just the fine, it was the feeling of being invisible, of having my worth ignored. How many times during the war had I risked my life and that of my comrades for a mission most would never understand? How many nights had I spent awake, attentive to every movement, every shadow, every sign that could save lives? And now, an unknown police officer, who had probably never seen war up close, seemed to believe he had the right to reduce me to a simple offender, an ordinary citizen being punished without regard for my past. As he continued writing, I felt a pang of anger mixed with frustration. But war had taught me to control my emotions, to observe before acting. I noticed something subtle: the officer's posture, his impatience with onlookers, and even the way he avoided any real eye contact. all signs of insecurity masquerading as authority. This was the conflict, not just an unfair ticket, but a symbolic demonstration of how the world often treats those who have given their all, yet are still judged by rules without context. The surrounding audience began to murmur. Some whispered criticisms, others gave disapproving looks. A teenager looked at me and rolled his eyes, muttering something about another old man trying to impose himself. These small public humiliations, as subtle as they were sharp, reminded me of the mental ambushes I suffered in the war, when doubt eroded the morale of those on the field. But I couldn't let them break me. Every second increased the tension, as if the city itself were holding its breath, awaiting the outcome. That's when I realized something had to happen to break that cycle of injustice, something that would show that my life isn't limited to rules written on paper, but rather to experience, courage, and dignity. But it wasn't time yet. First, I needed to endure the contempt, understand the extent of the injustice, and wait for the right moment to act. The initial conflict was established. The battle between authority and experience, between the coldness of the unknown and the depth of a life marked by sacrifice. And there, standing, feeling the weight of decades and memories, I understood that, just as on the battlefield, every detail mattered. The way I breathed, the way I held my posture, the way I controlled my voice, all of this could determine not only the immediate outcome, but also the perception of those witnessing it. The war may have been over years ago, but the lessons remain. Courage, patience, and timing were crucial. And the battle that was now beginning, seemingly simple, held the same importance as a mission that cost lives. The police officer looked up from the block and gave a cold, almost imperceptible smile that carried the weight of contempt. "Sir, the rules apply to everyone, regardless of who you are," he said, as if my history, my years of service, and every scar I bore meant absolutely nothing. The murmur of the street seemed to intensify, as if each syllable the officer uttered was a blade slicing through the surrounding air. I felt the gaze of a few passers-by, some curious, others silently judging. But the prevailing feeling was one of isolation, being surrounded and yet invisible, as if no one could truly understand what it meant to carry decades of experience, some of it forged under enemy fire. The teenager passing by now approached, looking down at me, and let out a suppressed laugh, muttering, "Look at the old man thinking he can argue with authority." The mockery was silent but cutting. Another passerby, a woman with headphones on, merely huffed and hurried on, as if trying to ignore me, but not without casting a judgmental glance. Every gesture, every reaction seemed to fuel the feeling of humiliation that was invading me. Not the fine itself, but the way my dignity was being eroded in front of strangers. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. Memories of humiliating moments in the war surfaced. Unfair orders, superiors disregarding vital decisions, colleagues questioning my choices. But in that moment, they weren't just memories. It was the symbolic repetition of a cruel reality. Years of sacrifice and service can be disregarded with a simple gesture of authority. I felt a pang of frustration and anger, but experience taught me not to react rashly, to observe, analyze, and plan the next step. The police officer, noticing my silence, seemed to revel in the situation. He leaned in slightly and spoke louder, as if he wanted everyone to hear. "Maybe you need to get used to the fact that rules exist and no one is above them. Not even someone with medals." That sentence, laden with sarcasm, hit me like a gust of icy wind. Each word reverberated not only on the street, but within me, triggering memories of loss, sacrifice, and nights when courage was all I had left. A man walking by with his dog commented softly, "How disrespectful," but his comment was lost in the whispers of the crowd, almost insignificant in the face of the officer's display of power. I felt isolated, not only by the officer, but by the crowd that seemed passive, watching the injustice unfold as if it were a distant spectacle. It was the ultimate humiliation, being wrong in front of everyone, even though I knew the truth was on my side. The rain began to fall slowly, thin drops running down my face, mixing with the sweat and accumulated tension. Each drop seemed to symbolize the weight of public contempt, the indifference of strangers, the sense of invisibility and injustice that many veterans face daily. My body, scarred by decades of combat and training, trembled not from the cold, but from the silent indignation that threatened to explode if left unchecked. And then a momentary silence fell. The officer paused, as if expecting my immediate submission, but something inside me flared. The awareness that humiliation could be transformed into opportunity. I needed to choose the right moment, the right gesture, the right word to reverse that public contempt and show that my history could not be erased by a pen and arbitrary authority. In that moment, I felt all the tension of injustice merge with memories of past battles. The humiliation was symbolic but powerful. The street, the crowd, the officer, all became part of an emotional battlefield. And I knew the twist was about to come. Something that would not only change the perception of the police officer, but also of everyone watching the scene, revealing the truth about who I really am. As the police officer raised his pad to sign the ticket, something unexpected happened, something that instantly changed the heavy atmosphere of that narrow, rainy street. An elderly man, wearing a wrinkled military uniform but still full of pride, approached with firm steps despite the obvious weight of age. In his hand trembled a badge, a medal of honor that reflected the light from the streetlights, as if trying to cut through the air charged with injustice. "Officer," the man said in a voice that, despite the age, carried authority and respect. "Before you sign, I'd like you to consider who's in front of you. He's not just any citizen, he served our country. He fought, bled, and lost friends to protect people who don't even know what true sacrifice is." The words rang like thunder in the quiet street. Some passers-by stopped in surprise, others began to whisper, feeling the tension shift. I, standing there, feeling my heart race, knew the tide had turned. The humiliation was still present, but now there was room for justice. The presence of that veteran, visibly recognized and respected, was more than symbolic. It was concrete proof that my life and my story could not be ignored. The police officer frowned, clearly disconcerted. He looked at the ticket book and then at us. And for the first time, the rigid and implacable authority seemed to waver. Every word the veteran spoke reverberated in the street, echoing my memories of the war. Moments when an unexpected act of courage or loyalty completely changed the course of events. I felt a surge of hope mixed with surprise. The battle that had seemed lost was now at a turning point. Meanwhile, other passers-by began to approach, watching with growing interest. A young couple who had previously started laughing now kept their eyes fixed on me, noticing the shift in energy in the air. A man with a cell phone camera began recording, and another man, leaning against the brick wall, said quietly, "Finally, someone is acknowledging the truth." The atmosphere shifted completely, from humiliation to the expectation of justice. The veteran in front of me continued, pointing to my medals hidden under my coat, discreet symbols of honor and courage. "You can't simply judge someone without knowing their story. He risked his life for all of us. Respect isn't imposed with pen and paper, it's earned with courage and action. Today, he deserves our recognition, not punishment." In that instant, something inside the officer shifted. Perhaps it was the awareness of the crowd, the intensity of the veteran's words, or the symbolic weight of the medals I carried. He stopped, took a deep breath, and for the first time looked directly at me. Not with coldness or blind authority, but with a spark of understanding, however small. It was the turning point that transformed a moment of humiliation into an opportunity for justice. I felt the weight of tension turn to relief and adrenaline. The rain, which had previously seemed to hammer my indignation, now seemed to purify the air, reflecting light off the puddles and casting a sparkle on the medals that told my story. Witnesses began to speak out, some verbally, others only with gestures of support, but all contributing to a perceptible shift in the atmosphere. In a matter of minutes, what had seemed lost, the public humiliation, the police officer's contempt, transformed into a stage of recognition. The power of truth, the symbolic force of the past, and the courage to intervene combined, creating an unexpected but inevitable turnaround. I realized in that instant that every battle I had fought, every loss I had endured, every moment of pain and resistance had prepared me for this moment when not only I, but symbolic justice would be restored. The police officer finally lowered the ticket book, as if the weight of the words and the presence of those veterans had shattered the rigidity that had seemed unshakable minutes before. Silence spread across the street, and I could feel every glance the crowd had on me, no longer of judgment or morbid curiosity, but of recognition, of a belated understanding of what I represent. The sensation was strange. The same street that had humiliated me now seemed to vibrate with symbolic justice, a silent tribute to my experiences, the scars I bear, and the life I dedicated to protecting others. "That's right," the police officer finally said, his voice lower, carrying a tone of respect that had previously seemed impossible to achieve. "No need for a ticket." The words, simple in their form, carried a monumental weight. Each letter seemed to echo in my memories, reminding me of days when an act of justice could mean survival on the battlefield. The crowd began to applaud, discreetly, but enough to break the tension in the air. Some passers-by who had previously laughed at me now approached, offering words of support or just respectful nods. The teenager who had ridiculed me minutes earlier looked away, embarrassed. But the humiliation he had tried to impose had been replaced by the collective recognition of what I represent. Justice, though symbolic, was manifesting itself clearly. The truth of my life and my choices was being acknowledged. The veteran who intervened smiled, nodding to me with respect and complicity. It was as if an invisible bridge had formed between our experiences, a silent understanding that, in critical moments, courage and dignity can change destinies. He said to me quietly, "Never underestimate the power of those who have fought for us all. Today they see, even if late, the value of your story." Those words touched me deeply, and a wave of gratitude ran through my tired body, marked not only by time, but by the weight of the memories I carry. As the applause and murmurs of approval continued, I realized that justice wasn't just about the absence of a fine, but about the validation of a lifetime of service, sacrifice, and difficult choices. Every look of respect, every gesture of recognition, represented the victory of a deeper principle, that truth and honor are forces that can defy even the arbitrariness of power. I looked around and saw people who, moments before, had seemed indifferent, now aware of what they had witnessed. An elderly couple held hands, murmuring words of admiration. A young woman pointed discreetly at my medals, as if finally understanding that they were not mere adornments, but symbols of courage, pain, and survival. The city, still shrouded in fine rain and the yellowed streetlights, felt different, as if it had breathed with me, sharing a silent but deeply meaningful victory. And then, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of tension finally dissolve. Justice had been restored, not just formally but emotionally and symbolically. I was exhausted, but in a different way, no longer burdened by the frustration of injustice, but strengthened by recognition, by the certainty that my life and my story had been seen and respected. The world hadn't completely transformed, but in that instant, honor was restored, and humanity, even if only for brief moments, proved capable of recognizing the value of what truly matters. The street, the passers-by, the police officer, and the veteran in front of me had become part of a symbolic framework. The victory of respect over contempt, of truth over arbitrariness. And deep down, I understood that justice isn't always immediate. But when it manifests, it carries with it the power to transform painful experiences into profound recognition, reminding everyone that the past and the sacrifice cannot be erased. As the tension of injustice dissipated, a wave of memories began to wash over my mind, like a silent film projected in the corridors of my memory. The rain now fell more softly, each drop reflecting the light from the streetlights. And I realized that this moment of recognition had awakened something deeper than simple relief. There was a reconnection with everything I had lived, everything I had lost, and everything I had learned. I remembered the endless nights I spent watching the starry sky in foreign lands, far from home, hearing only the sound of the wind and the distant crackles of battle. Each star seemed to represent a life lost, friends who would never return. I still hear their voices in my dreams, echoes of interrupted laughter, orders shouted in the air, and the crushing silence of fields that had become makeshift graves. These ghosts have accompanied me for years, shaping my worldview and teaching me that courage is not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. The medals hidden under my coat are not just cold metal. They are fragments of my story, symbols of resistance, loss, and victory. Each one carries memories of difficult decisions, of moments when I could have failed, of friends who entrusted their lives to my leadership. Today, that simple public intervention, the presence of the other veteran, and the recognition of the crowd not only lifted the fine but touched those deep memories, allowing me to feel that my experiences were finally being seen and valued. I also felt the weight of human relationships, the fragility of other people's perceptions, and the power of testimony. The people who approached me, even those who had previously laughed at me, now showed respect. I realized that every human being carries their own invisible battle, but recognizing the courage and sacrifice of another human being can build bridges that transform moments of injustice into lessons in humanity. As I walked slowly, feeling the humid heat of the rain mixed with adrenaline, my mind returned to the lessons of war. The discipline, the patience, the attention to detail, all of this had prepared me for this moment. But now, there was something more. the understanding that justice and recognition are not merely mechanical, they are deeply human. And as I felt the gaze of the crowd, the respectful silence of the police officer, and the smile of the veteran who intervened, I realized that the emotion was as much mine as theirs. All participants in a symbolic moment, charged with meaning. The outside world remained indifferent, and many people would probably never understand the weight of that moment. But for me, it was enough to realize that my story, my experiences, and my courage had not been in vain. There was a kind of reconciliation, not only with society, but with myself. The recognition I received did not erase the wounds of war, but offered a pause, a moment of profound emotional relief that allowed me to breathe and feel pride without guilt or bitterness. Every step I took on that street became a silent meditation on sacrifice, memory, and humanity. I realized that even outside the battlefield, life continues to test us, and that true courage often manifests itself in the form of dignity preserved in the face of contempt, patience in the face of injustice, and the ability to remain whole even when no one is looking. And in that moment of deep reflection, the rain seemed to wash away not only the street, but also some of the pain and weight accumulated over the years. The cold was still present, but the sensation was different. There was an inner warmth, the certainty that my experiences had value, that my life had meaning, and that, even on a simple street, under yellow lights and a light rain, recognition and justice could manifest, transforming a moment of humiliation into something deeply human and symbolic. Just when I thought the tension had dissipated, a new element emerged, intensifying everything around me. The policeman, still with a hesitant look, seemed to be searching for a way to reaffirm his authority. In a gesture that could be interpreted as arbitrary, he raised his pen again as if he were about to create a new obstacle, completely ignoring the presence of the other veteran and the crowd watching. My body reacted immediately. Every fiber of my military experience awakened. My heart raced, not only from fear but from the need to protect my own dignity, as if my whole life had prepared me for this exact moment. Every sound from the street seemed amplified. The dripping of rain on the asphalt, the light rustling of leaves, the tense footsteps of approaching passers-by, curious and worried. The atmosphere became almost palpable, charged with tension, a mixture of imminent injustice and collective expectation. I felt a vivid memory of a battlefield, when the position I occupied was surrounded, and every decision could mean life or death. The difference now was that the battle wasn't with bullets, but with perception, respect, and truth. But the principles were the same. Patience, strategy, and courage were essential. The police officer wasn't a mortal enemy, but the injustice he represented could corrode the honor, dignity, and narrative of my life. The teenager who had previously mocked me now held his breath, along with other passers-by who formed a silent barrier of observation. It was as if the whole world had held its breath, waiting to see if I would give in or stand up, showing not physical strength, but the strength of conviction and accumulated experience. Each second stretched out, each heartbeat echoed like war drums, and I knew that any gesture could determine the outcome of this symbolic battle. So, I took a deep breath, focusing on each training memory, each lesson learned in years of service. The hand that touched my chest to discreetly adjust the metal wasn't just a gesture of pride. It was a silent warning that my story couldn't be ignored. The crowd seemed to sense the tension, and an aura of respect began to grow, almost tangible, as I kept my gaze fixed on the police officer. The next instant was quick but laden with meaning. I spoke firmly, each word carefully measured. "Sir, my past and my actions cannot be summed up by a piece of paper. But the truth doesn't need permission to manifest itself. Today, this street is witnessing something greater than a fine. It is witnessing dignity and respect." The words echoed, not only in the air but in the eyes of the people around. The tension that hung in the air became almost electric, and the police officer, realizing the force of the situation, backed down, unable to maintain his rigid posture in the face of so many witnesses and the clarity of my argument. It was the peak of tension. Injustice almost consuming dignity, contempt challenging honor, and, at the same time, moral courage triumphing, showing that experience and character can reverse even the coldest abuse of authority. For a moment I felt the same adrenaline rush I had felt in conflict zones, but now there was no immediate physical danger, only the need to remain upright in the face of injustice and the crowd. The rain fell harder, almost as if celebrating the tension overcome, reflecting light on the metals and creating a silent, symbolic spectacle of the victory of truth and respect over contempt and arbitrariness. The climax had been reached. Maximum tension had tested my patience, courage, and honor, and now everything was about to be resolved, preparing the ground for the final consequence, where justice, morality, and reflection would meet definitively. The rain had eased, leaving only small puddles glistening in the streetlights, reflecting a world that finally seemed lighter, more just. The police officer lowered his pen completely, and the ticket that had been the genesis of the entire conflict now disappeared, as if it had never existed. I felt a profound relief, but it wasn't just about the absence of the paper. It was the feeling that truth, honor, and dignity had finally been restored before witnesses who, minutes before, hadn't understood what was happening. The veteran who intervened gave a slight smile of approval as the passers-by began to disperse, some murmuring words of respect, others simply absorbing the silent lesson that the situation conveyed. That moment wouldn't change the entire world, but it transformed the perspective of every person present, showing that injustice can be confronted, that dignity is non-negotiable, and that a life marked by service and sacrifice deserves recognition, even when society tries to ignore it. For me, the experience left invisible but profound marks. Each step back to my car was accompanied by a sense of completeness, as if every memory of the war, every loss endured, and every challenge faced had found in that instant a small symbolic validation. The medals I carried, hidden under my coat, now shone differently, not just as symbols of past achievements, but as living testaments to dignity preserved in the face of injustice. The police officer walked away, perhaps in shame, perhaps simply accepting the truth silently, but his presence now carried a new dimension, a recognition that authority cannot replace respect and humanity. The crowd, though dispersed, left a trail of gazes that continued to reflect the change. A small town, an ordinary street, transformed by a moment of collective consciousness. I reflected on the impact of this experience, the initial humiliation, the public scorn, the heightened tension, and finally, the recognition. All of this created a symbolic narrative that showed how even the smallest acts can carry profound meaning. A simple, unjust fine effectively became a catalyst for justice, reflection, and empathy. The experience reminded me that important battles don't always involve weapons. Some require patience, moral courage, and the willingness to stand firm in the face of arbitrariness. As I walked away, I felt the cool night breeze again, mingled with the damp scent of rain. Every sound in the city seemed clearer, every movement more noticeable. I was tired, yes, but strengthened. Injustice had been confronted, respect restored, and dignity reaffirmed. The silent street now carried with it the echo of an invisible lesson, a reminder that honor and truth can prevail, even when no one seems to be paying attention. And in that moment, I understood that life goes on, with daily battles, injustices large and small, and unexpected moments of recognition. My every step now carried the certainty that my experiences were not in vain, that my story had value, and that even in trivial situations, it is possible to transform humiliation into learning, contempt into respect, and injustice into justice. The night wore on, and with it, the realization that, although the war was over, the lessons remain. Dignity is not negotiable, courage is not measured only in combat, and life, in its complexity, always offers opportunities to honor the past and restore justice, even in the most unexpected scenarios. As I walked slowly through the wet streets, feeling the echo of the puddles reflecting the light from the lampposts, a profound understanding settled within me. Life, I realized, is a series of constant battles, some visible, others invisible, and justice is not always manifested in an immediate or obvious way. But what remains is the importance of dignity, honor, and courage, principles that no piece of paper, arbitrary rule, or public contempt can erase. This seemingly simple experience, an unfair fine issued by a police officer unprepared to understand my story, became a powerful metaphor for post-war life. Every veteran who returns to society faces daily micro-conflicts, moments in which courage is not demonstrated in physical combat, but in silence, patience, and moral resilience. I realized that the battle fought outside the battlefields can be as intense as the one fought in trenches or on risky missions. The enemy is often indifference, misunderstanding, or prejudice. The recognition I received at that moment, not only from the other veteran but from the crowd and finally from the police officer himself, reinforced something I already knew. Truth and justice can manifest themselves even in the smallest acts, but it takes courage to keep them intact. The world doesn't always observe us, nor does it always recognize our sacrifices. However, personal dignity and integrity remain as invisible armor that protects and defines us. I also felt the importance of the witnesses, the presence of other people who chose to observe and silently or verbally support the truth, transformed what could have been a moment of humiliation into a testimony of justice and empathy. The lesson here is clear. Society is shaped not only through laws and rules, but through human perception, the ability to recognize the value of others and to act when injustice manifests itself. Reflecting on the scene, I realized that the battles of everyday life are opportunities to reaffirm principles, demonstrate moral courage, and inspire those who observe us. An unfair fine, a scornful glance, an arbitrary authority, all these elements can become catalysts for moments of learning and transformation, both personal and collective. The moral of the story is not just about a veteran's victory over a fine. It's about the persistence of human dignity, the strength of truth, and the importance of standing firm, even when no one is watching. And perhaps the darkest and most powerful lesson is that seemingly small injustices can reflect broader patterns of disregard and indifference in society. But likewise, the courage to resist, to not give in to contempt, and to show one's own truth, however simple it may seem, can inspire respect, recognition, and above all, change. Each of us carries invisible battles, scars that no one sees, and stories that few know. But how we respond to challenges, humiliations, and injustices is what defines our true strength. As I walked away from the scene, feeling the rain slowly dry on my face, I realized that each step was not just physical, but symbolic, a testament to the fact that honor can prevail, that justice can emerge even in unexpected moments, and that life, with all its difficulties and humiliations, offers opportunities to reaffirm our humanity. The world continues, indifferent at many moments, but also capable of recognizing the value of those who remain upright. The final reflection crystallizes as follows. Courage is not measured only in visible battles, but in how we confront invisible injustices. Honor is not something that is received, but something that is maintained. And life, with all its harshness, always offers the chance to transform humiliation into learning, contempt into respect, and injustice into justice. Even in the smallest streets, under the simplest rain, the battle for human dignity continues. And winning this battle, silent but powerful, is a victory that no one can take away.